Hey y'all, this is a jar of pressure canned deer meat. It doesn't need to be refrigerated and it can be eaten right out of the jar. And this is a big, beautiful, rain tanned deer skin. And both of these came from a roadkill deer, and this deer was hit and killed on the highway and would have just rotted if I didn't pick it up. And there's so many resources on roadkill animals, and often people are a little intimidated to pick them up for obvious reasons. But I wanted to make a little video to kind of show what the process is like, so hopefully it can empower you to pick up roadkill. And do make sure to check the laws where you live. In a lot of states it's legal, you just have to get a permit, and then it's you can pick it up. So I hope this video helps to empower and inspire you to honor and utilize the animals' lives that sadly die on the roadside. Okay, there's a roadkill deer right up here, and it's not in a very safe place, but luckily you can pull it down. There's an access road, so we're gonna do that. So I'm just trying to figure out two things: how old this deer is, and then where it got hit. I can see it got hit in the head, so that means the body is probably in pretty good condition, and it's already stiffened up a little bit. But I think that right now it's important to just get off the road. It's better just to get off the road. So we're gonna just load it up and assess more when we get to a place that's off the highway. Okay, got the deer away from the highway and up into the woods where it is much safer and quieter. So when I see a roadkill, first thing I wanna assess is how old is it? Is it worth picking up? For me, a lot of times I will pick up a roadkill even if it's older, just to move it and get it away from the highway, because when it's on the road it attracts other scavengers and come to eat it, and then they get hit, and then just more animals are dying for no reason. So I try to pull roadkill off the road and into the woods if I can, or if there's not a place to do that, like if it's somebody's yard, I'll pick them up and bring them to a place. I do that for the other animals and for the deer too. I feel like just getting them into a more peaceful place where the the ravens and coyotes and stuff can eat them without risk of getting hit. I feel like it's a service to the animal kingdom, so I like to do that. But unfortunately, with chronic wasting disease, that is a concern of spreading that around. Unfortunately, that has spread. It came from Colorado and it's up in Montana now. There's no cases right where I am at, but it is in the state, and that is a concern. And so when you're moving wildlife around, that's something to be aware of. With me, it's really local where I picked this deer from. I could walk there as a deer walks or a crow flies, so that's less of a concern, the chronic wasting, because this deer, it's more of a concern when you're moving animals from one place into a different area. But this deer, I'm processing it in a place that it could have naturally died on its own. So, but you can get animals tested, and I recommend that, whether hunted or roadkill. You pull out the lymph nodes and you can test them. It's free, and then that way and you're not spreading chronic wasting disease around, because that's not good for anybody. All right, for most people, when you see a roadkill, you want to just assess, is this something worth stopping and picking up, which the age is a big factor in that. But also, I think the first thing is seeing safety. Is it in a place that you can get the animal safe without endangering your life or other people's lives? Is there a safe place to pull over? Can you go get the animal? Is it in the middle of a highway? Things like that are important to consider. This deer, when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, that doesn't really look safe. It was right next to a guardrail, and the highway's not that wide. And when I first saw it, a big semi went by, and I'm like, oof. But there was an access road lower, so I could drive down on the access road and just pull the deer off the highway, so I didn't even have to walk along the highway at all. That's a really good scenario for as far as safety. So safety first, can you get the animal safely? Next thing is, how old is the animal, aging the animal. Some things are really obvious. You're gonna be using all your senses, what you can see, what you can smell, and what you can feel to determine how old this animal is. Some stuff's really obvious. If you can tell that other animals have already been eating it, or the eyes are eaten out, or the butthole is eaten out, you know that it's been there for some while because the scavengers have already gotten to it. It's at least 24 hours old, if not older. Obviously maggots, things like that, those are all things you're like, okay, this is too old for human use. And in that case, you know, I still pull those animals at least off the road into the woods if I can, so more animals don't get hit. But I can understand if some people aren't really willing to do that. So if your animal is not showing any clear signs of being too old, what are the things to look for? Well, I always look at the eyes and see how clear the eyes are looking, and then also the blood. If blood's coming out of somewhere, how red is it? How bright is it? Obviously, the brighter red, the fresher it is, and the darker it is, the older it is. And then also stiffness of the animal too. What can you feel when an animal's really fresh? It's really, you know, really loose, and you can bend all the muscles, and that's pretty clear when you're like, wow, this is a really fresh animal. But then after like 2 to 4 or 6 hours, depending, rigor mortis sets in, and that's when all the muscles stiffen. And that's typically a condition where you're going to find an animal, and a stiff animal, that means it's still, you know, probably within 24 hours old, because what happens is, fresh animal, you can move, and then after a few hours, the rigor mortis sets in, it's stiff, and all those muscles are stiff. But then after that, about 24 to 48 hours after, the rigor mortis goes away and the muscles are loose again. And that's the point where an animal, that's kind of getting into the too old range for most people. Everyone has a different opinion about this, but especially if you're kind of just getting into it, if it's already past the rigor mortis stage and into the place of being movable again, typically maybe you want to give it to the dogs, you know? Another thing you can take into account when trying to determine how fresh an animal is having, well, if you drive a lot, then you can say, oh, well, I drove this road yesterday and it wasn't here, things like that. But also, if you have a network of friends, if you're getting serious about picking up roadkill, you can let your friends know, and then they can tell you, you know, give you a heads up. And this deer actually, you know, I don't drive around that much. I'm with my goats a lot, but a friend of mine knows that I like to get roadkill, so he texted me this morning and was like, hey, there's a roadkill, and he drives that road every day, so he could tell me it wasn't there yesterday. So I know that if he texts me, I'm not wasting my time because it's within 24 hours. And anyway, this deer probably got hit really early this morning, and it's probably at this point, you know, 6 hours old or something like that. After determining the rough age of the animal, how long ago since death, the next thing is to determine where the animal got hit. This can also sometimes be obvious, and then of course there's more subtle situations too. If an animal, you know, you've seen this, unfortunately, animals get hit so hard, they're just, you know, blasted all over the place, and there's not, you know, not much scavenging to be done. And then on the other end of it, there's animals that are hit in the head, and there's a lot of scavenging to be done. Almost everything on them is still good and edible and usable. And then there's everything in between. And, you know, a lot you can kind of tell just by looking at them from the outside. You're like, okay, this leg's broken, they were hit in the shoulder, or, you know, the spine's broken. You can kind of tell if there's any broken bones. And, you know, you can kind of start to guess, okay, how much meat might be good on this animal. And then a lot of stuff you just see once you skin the animal, and then you can tell, you you know, what parts are good, where they were hit, that kind of things, where the injuries are. And also once you get into skinning an animal, you can tell more about the age too. You can be like, oh well, actually this animal is still warm, even though it's probably a few hours old, because the rigor mortis is set in. It's still on the fresher end of that because the muscles are still warm. And obviously another thing to consider is time of year and temperature outside. Animals, you know, summertime, the window for picking them up is a lot smaller, and winter it's longer because obviously the cold environment is cooling them down faster and keeping them fresh longer. So, and breakdown happens quicker in the warmer weather. So those are all things to consider. And so this deer looks like it was hit in the head and maybe hit other places, but so far it only looks like it was hit in the head. But once I get in and start skinning, I'll kind of see more. So let's get going. Okay, so now I'm gonna start showing the deer. So graphic content warning: if you don't want to see blood or a deer, then this is the time for you to probably stop watching this video. Okay, so far, from what I can tell, it seems like this deer is just hit in the head. None of the other leg bones or spines seem to be broken. But it is with roadkill, since you don't know where there might be broken bone shards, it's good to have like extra caution when you're skinning. But anyway, to start processing this animal, I'm gonna do it just like I would a deer if it wasn't a roadkill, which is start by cutting down the skin, just a nice cut all the way down, and then do all the leg cuts and just start skinning. So there we go. And this guy, you can tell, is starting to stiffen up. So I sometimes will like use their legs like a lever. You can start this cut up at the neck. I like to start it kind of right in the brisket area, because you can't hit anything. There's just muscle there, so you're not gonna risk getting into the stomach cavity at all. And I like to put my finger right behind the blade like that. And you can also get in there with your finger. Part of the animal processing process, you take the forelegs off, but I like to wait to the very end to do that because they are useful, especially when you're working by yourself, as leverage. I'll like pop the leg on top of my shoulder and stuff to kind of keep things open, and right here I could put this leg up in the arm of the camper shell so it can stay open while I work. And with the legs, you cut around, and then I generally just follow the color change. It's most convenient to hang an animal to skin them, but I wanted to demonstrate what to do if you don't have a place to hang your animal. I like to save the hides to tan them, so I'm careful to not nick the skin. If I'm skinning on the ground and don't have a tarp, I'll use the skin as a tarp, or I'll put boughs down to keep the meat from getting dirt on it. So once I do that those initial cuts, and I can just pull the skin. I don't even need to use my knife. I can just pull, and I always try to keep the hair off my hands just so then I'm not getting it. I'm trying to reduce the amount of hair on the meat, not that it matters that much, but hitting the connective tissue here.
After doing the initial cuts, I like to put the knife down and just work with my hands. However, this is easier to do when the animal's hanging and harder to do when it's on the ground.
A lot of times if I have an animal hanging, I make sure that this twitch muscle stays on the animal, but I'm kind of not going to worry about it too much right now. And so see here, you can just kind of get your knuckles in there. Alright, so now I've got the skin off, not the entire animal, but the front shoulder is exposed. So I'm going to just go ahead and take this quarter off, and then it's out of the way and I can continue on to the rest of the deer. Okay, so a lot of times when I'm working with roadkill, instead of skinning the entire animal, then gutting, then quartering, I sort of skin and quarter as I go. And so right now the entire deer is not skinned, but I've skinned enough to where the front shoulder is exposed. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the front shoulder off. And when I work with roadkill, I tend to skin and quarter at the same time, skin and take a quarter off, skin, take a quarter off. And I'm also, especially with roadkill, I'm going to be doing what's known as the gutless method, where I'm going to be taking all the quarters off of the animal without ever getting into the gut cavity. You know, when I am processing an animal that I've hunted or a domestic animal I've killed, I do not do the gutless method because I want to get everything and use everything. But with roadkill, there can be some benefits to not getting in the gut cavity. So... And sometimes with roadkill you can't avoid it because the gut cavity is already open. But luckily this one was hit in the head, so it's pretty easy to just do the gutless method. So here we go, let's take off this front quarter. And the cool thing about the front shoulders of deer and elk and goats and sheep is, well, you'll see, just check it out. So I'm just pulling up here, the tension, pulling up on the leg, and kind of cutting as I go. Well, it looks like there's a little bit of trauma in there, but not too bad. There you go. So for removing the foreleg off, I kind of like to try to bend the knee a little bit, and then you hit that tendon and then it really bends, and you just cut all around. Alright, and then once you've cut it all around, it should be fairly easy just to twist off like that, and then there will be one more tendon to get through. Yep, just like that. And then for these forelegs, I'll usually just make a little, oop, it wasn't in there. Make a little, on the foreleg, make a little spot in the tendon like that to be able to hang it. Okay, right here I'm pulling the skin so I can create some tension and expose this fascia layer. So I'm going to go through the fascia and not cut the skin or the meat. Just like that. Yeah, so now we're just going to do the leg cuts. So we'll just go around. Usually I don't like to go into the hair like that, but for the leg cuts I do. And then I just wipe my blade, get all the way around. And people are really worried about this scent gland right here, and you can just cut right under it. It's not really that big of a deal. Like, people make a really big deal out of it, but I don't know why. Holding things a little differently than I would, because I'm trying to have my hands not in the shot. Can pull. And I'm going to just cut right down the color line here, or the color change, and meet up at this point. And again, that tension, I'm just pulling up on the skin to create some tension in a little pocket, and I can just meet right up here with my other cut. Alright, we'll get the rest of that when we flip him over. Alright, so now I have the skin off this back leg, or this back quarter, and I'm gonna go ahead and take it off. So I'm just gonna cut right here, and the femoral artery is there, so usually there's a lot of blood, and that's just how it is. Well, I guess if you bleed an animal out, maybe there's less, but I'm really using the tension here. Go around that bone. Get in there. Okay, so you can see right here is the ball and socket joint. That's what we're going for, and there's one little piece of connective tissue there, a tendon. I'm gonna cut it, and there we go. The ball and socket is now separated. And then everything else is just muscle. And there's that artery right there. So that's where all the blood starts coming. Okay, here we have it. And I made sure to not cut this tendon, so I have a nice handle just like that. Skinned the one side and got the quarters off of one side, so now it's time to flip this deer over. In some cases it makes sense to gut the animal after skinning and before quartering, but I'm showing the process that I typically do with roadkill because a lot of times with roadkill the stomach is exploded inside of the stomach cavity, and it's best to do the gutless method of keeping everything contained. So in this video I am skinning and quartering as I go, all before gutting. Alright, so now we'll take the other front quarter off. So there we have it. Another quarter for the pot. So there's the ball and socket joint, and there's this one tendon that holds it, so once I get it, then everything's gonna be way more free. Oh, it looks like, what's going on here? There's just a little break in his pelvis. Yeah, okay. Yeah, his pelvis is broken. So I just want to be careful to not hit my knife on the bone. Yeah, so even though this deer looks like just hit in the head by a vehicle, I bet when the impact, he probably flew back against the guardrail and then maybe broke his pelvis there, because that's all broken. So again, with roadkill, and I mean any animal, I guess, if you don't know what kind of trauma it's been under, you don't know what bones are going to be broken, so you want to be careful. But yeah, the pelvis is all smashed in there. Okay. This is going to dull my knife, but there's kind of no way around it. Alright, so this quarter has a little bit of bloodshot meat, but not too bad considering this pelvis is pretty smashed. Yep, and then there the guts are right there, but they're not punctured amazingly. That's pretty incredible. And even though this is a roadkill deer and has, you know, a broken pelvis and stuff, it's still a lot cleaner than, oh, here's the lymph, or, yeah, a little lymph node right there. Ours, that's a lymph node. Anyway, I've worked in a game processor before. As a skinner, I skinned, you know, thousands of deer and elk and moose and antelope. And even though this is a roadkill deer that sometimes people look down upon for eating, this is like this animal's cleaner than a lot of animals I've seen killed by hunters and brought into the shop. So this is a lot of meat that, you know, otherwise would be quote unquote wasted along the side of the road. Okay, so now I have all 4 quarters off of this deer, and they're all good. They're all going to be great meat. And so now I just want to finish getting the hide off. It's just connected here at the tail still. So I'll just pull that off, and then finish the last cut around the neck, and then the hide will be free. Okay, so now the hide is free. It's a pretty big hide. Pretty big one. Now we're gonna get the back straps, and those are pretty simple to get. I'm just gonna locate the spine and then just run my knife down the spine. But first I wanna just kind of get this top little layer off, and this meat is edible. Just kind of to be able to see the backstrap easier. It's right here. Alright, so there's the spine. So I'm just gonna run my knife right along the spine. That all the way up towards the neck. And all the way down. And you'll see there's just these ribs, well, the vertebrae right here, and you can just kind of run your knife along them. Get all in there. Oh yeah, there's a little more bloodshot right here, some trauma. And then I come in, that's the top. Oh yeah, a little bit of trauma, but for a roadkill, still looking very good. Alright. Oh, there's a little rock just popped off. That's something that happens with roadkill. They have little pieces of gravel and stuff. So I'm just opening up that top layer so then I can see the muscle. And go all the way down. Good. There we have it, one backstrap. So now I'm gonna flip this guy over to get that backstrap. All right, we'll get this other backstrap. Pull this other muscle out of the way.
The backstraps are a choice cut of meat, so it's really nice that it usually works out, that they're good on roadkill. Most of the roadkill that I've picked up, I was able to salvage the backstraps, so I hope you can too. And also the backstraps, they have a layer of sinew on them, which you can see, and that can be used as thread or for fletching on arrows and a lot of cool crafts like that. So that's something to keep in mind to save off the backstraps.
All right, there's the other backstrap, looking in really good shape. Okay, so now we're to the point where we got the hide off and the 4/4, and for a lot of people this might be the point where you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to use the quarters and the hide, but the rest I don't know about getting in there, and that's fine. And with roadkill, a lot of times they can be pretty beat up, and this is like a good stopping point, but I kind of like to try to get as much off the animal as I can, and being able to harvest the organs off of a roadkill I feel like is rare, but since this guy was hit in the head, I think that his heart and liver are going to be probably good. It seems like his stomach and intestines are not ruptured, so I'm going to actually get in there and pull those out.
I'm getting into the abdominal cavity carefully to not nick the stomach with my knife. And once I'm in there, you'll see wrapped around the stomach and the intestines is this beautiful web of fat called the caul fat, and all of that can be pulled off the stomach and intestines and be utilized and harvested just like any other fat would be. And this is the skirt meat, which is edible and delicious, just like the rest of the meat on the carcass. And before the guts are free to fall into the bucket, they need to be separated at the end, which is the butthole, and I already did that cut. And then up at the top, up at the esophagus and the trachea need to be cut. And that's what I'm doing right here. And after that cut is made, the stomach and intestines will be free and they can be pulled out of the abdominal cavity into the bucket.
Okay. All right, so here's the liver, and it's pretty good shape actually. Alright, here's the kidneys.
Since this deer's stomach was not exploded, all the meat on the carcass is good and edible. However, chronic wasting is found in the spinal cord and in the brain, so it's important to have a negative test for chronic wasting before cutting into the spine or removing the head.
Anyway, here's the heart. So even on a roadkill, harvesting, being able to harvest the organs out of it, so pretty amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I love the heart. This is my favorite organ. So delicious. Okay, so there you have it. Even on a roadkill, still able to harvest the organs. I got the liver and the heart right here. So that's amazing. That's usually the one thing that's not good on a roadkill is the organs, but in this case, we're lucky. All right, there we have it. That is the roadkill process. It was really successful. We got all 4 quarters and both backstraps and the hide. And this deer was a pretty simple one, just as far as it was hit in the head, which makes it you know, easier to process versus ones that are hit in the body. But it did have a broken pelvis, so I think what happened is it probably got hit in the head, and then by impact it flew back and hit the guardrail, and that broke the deer's pelvis. But yeah, we were still able to harvest pretty much everything, which is amazing. And you know, I've found, you know, over the years, I've gotten more and more bold about what I'll get into and pick up. And at first, you know, it can really seem, you're like, oh man, this animal is like really beat up. I don't really know if I can get any meat. But I've had those experiences and still just got in there and found that, you know, most of the quarters, maybe even all of them, are still usable. Because the, you know, the guts and everything that you don't really want on the meat, it's mostly the organs that you can't harvest, but the quarters are kind of protected, and there's a little bit of space between the quarters and the intestines, and so usually they're harvestable. Obviously not all the time, but I've just found, you know, as I get more bold and I'm like, well, let's just see, you know, this like looks pretty bloody and beat up, and I'm like, oh, actually the quarters are good, and sometimes the backstraps are too. And I've seen all different kinds of situations with roadkill, and you know, obviously some of them are too hit just too hard to utilize, but I have found that the more bold I get, the more rewards I find, because the meat, there's more usable meat than meets the eye, typically. You know, people have asked me, they're like, Callie, why do you eat roadkill when you can hunt? You know, like it's kind of below me to eat roadkill, or that it's gross. And I get that, because there's kind of a stigma around roadkill, and I used to be a vegetarian, so I was grossed out by just meat in general, fresh, delicious meat. I'd be kind of like, ugh, turned off by. And then obviously the thought of roadkill is gross, because we mostly think of like rotting, green, maggoty meat, but the reality is, a lot of roadkill, if you find it fresh enough, it is in perfect condition, and it's just as good as if you go hunt an animal. And that's what I've found over the years of doing this. And so for me, it's like, if I can be picking up roadkill, I almost like it better than hunting, just in the fact, I mean, I love the process of hunting and the tracking and, you know, really getting in tune the way you need to be in tune to hunt. But I don't like taking life, and picking up roadkill is a way that I can eat delicious, wild, unprocessed meat, and without having to take a life, because that life has already been taken. And it's unfortunate that animals die on the roadside, but if they are dying, I am thankful that I have the skills now that I can honor their lives by turning them into food and turning them into clothing, and really utilizing to the utmost, and at least just getting them off the road so other animals don't get hit. Alright y'all, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something and feel a little more empowered to pick up a roadkill.